The first thing I want to cover in terms of the posing is actually thinking of the face like you would with a gesture drawing. So, for example, let's say we have facial expressions here. So I'm just on lineofaction.com, which is a great page for doing gesture drawing or just random expressions. And when you're looking at the face, a lot of students, what they'll do is they'll find pictures online like this and then put it side by side with the rig and then try to copy the face, which is a good practice, but there is something that needs to be kept in mind. And Mark Flash, hello! How are you almost always happy? I don't know, I guess I'm a happy person, I guess. I enjoy life. The lack of water and sleep, I guess, maybe? It plays with your brain and makes you see things. Colorful colors. Always happy. Canadian, maybe. All the maple syrup, it just gets into your blood and energizes you. So when people are copying the face, they tend to copy it. But this is going to be the character we're going to be posing out today. This is the Overlord rig. And the first thing you'll notice is that his proportions are pretty extreme. He's got this super long chin and mouth area. His nose is kind of squashed into his face. He's got these exaggerated proportions. And what this means is that we can't just take a pose from, let's say, an average person, like average proportions, and just copy it onto the rig. It just won't fit. His face isn't the same. So what we need to do is interpolate. This is the exact same thing that we need to do when we're posing a shot. Or posing a character, I should say. So, for example, this is where the gesture comes in here. When you're taking a gesture here, let's say you do a quick gesture drawing. So for anyone who doesn't know what a gesture drawing is, it's when you just kind of try to capture the feeling of a pose, a kind of line of action through it very quickly. You're not interested in the detail. It's more just getting the attitude in there. And I drew that head a little too low. Let's bring that up a little bit more. Now, when I'm doing gesture drawings, I try not to undo. I just try to kind of redraw. And then the shoulder kind of comes forward here. Okay, so just trying to do this quickly here. So let's say we have something like that. It's not quite right, but we're not going to spend too much time on it. So we've got that. Well, this is all well and good, but what if our character has different proportions than our character on screen? So maybe we're dealing with a character who's got a tiny little body, like this. Well, we can't just translate this proportion onto the character straight on. We have to instead find the core of the pose, the core elements that make this pose feel the way it does, and then translate those onto the rig. It's not just copy paste directly. It's interpolation. It's analyzing and then reapplying and reimagining. And the same thing would happen if, for example, you had a really big character with a tiny little head and tiny little legs here. Like, again, you can't just copy and paste, because if the character's head is down here in his shoulders, if he does this, you're just not going to see that head. It's going to be totally gone. So we need to figure out what makes the pose feel the way it does. It's the line of action. It's the contrapposto, this kind of squash here, the stretch on this side, the way he's shifting his weight into this kind of back leg right there. There's all of these different elements that we can take and then put onto any rig. So for example, let's take our little character here. We could do the same thing where we'll push that little body here, try to keep the proportions of the character. So this character has a little thin top and then a wide bottom here. So keep that top thin, widen the bottom, but still keeping that element of the pose. Now they've got a huge head. Let's make that really big. So their face might not get covered like this character here, but we can push a little bit of that shoulder in there. So something like that. So it's not an exact copy, but we're trying to reapply those elements. Same thing if we had the big character. So once again, let's do the same pose, but this time we've got huge arms. Let's just make those really big, and a tiny little head that's kind of sitting in the shoulders here. Well, if I just took that arm, and you can see how in the shot his arm is kind of angled slightly upwards here. If I just did that, well, maybe I could push it so that his head is actually below the arm. That could work. So I'm changing the proportions of the shot, or not the proportions. I'm changing the attitude of the shot ever so slightly to fit the proportions of this character. And let's bring that foot in there. So we get something like that, maybe. Arm's a little weirdly proportioned there, but... So you get something like that, maybe. Or you could bring the arm way down. So let's kind of remove that. And, well, if we need that face to be visible, that arm is gonna have to come down. So he would have to be something more like this. We have to make changes. We can't just copy it one to one. The face is the exact same thing. So that's going to be what I want to talk about today, is how do we find what to look at on the face? Because with the body, it's kind of easy. We can see the line of action of the shoulders, of the hips, the line of action through the body. We can see the squash on one side and the stretch on the other. We can see the different visual elements coming in towards the screen, the different angles to things, the complex versus simplicity of a curve, all of these different elements. So how do we do that with the face? Well, honestly, it's pretty much all the same things. Now, before I jump in here, let me actually catch up with the chat, because I do see I thought I saw some questions here. Just a side question, but will Cameron come back to streaming? Eventually. He does have some 2D animations that he's planning on doing. He's really just kind of swamped with projects right now. So hopefully they'll die down in the near future. We'll see. Every time it seems like they're finally kind of dying down, more things get piled on. So hopefully it'll happen soon. Let's see. But is good at it, but he has dudes with 1/6 head ratio. Let's see. I really don't want to put the refund my ticket for the NIFA and NSC. It really sucks that everyone has to rebook all their tickets. He's Prat Bros. Yeah, it's not Bo or Cameron, it's Prat Bros. It's Bo for anyone's curious. If anyone's interested this year, the Animeo from Gran Canaria, Spain is doing all their masterclass and panels for free online. Oh, that's awesome. I'll have to check that out. Do we have a twin language? Like if you mean a made up language that only we speak, we used to when we were very young, very, very young. Apparently, I don't even remember it. Apparently, we had created our own language that only we knew how to speak. I wish I could still remember some of it. That would be really cool. Other than that, we've been around each other long enough that we don't really have to say a lot of stuff to know what each other is thinking. So I don't know if it's a secret language more than just kind of you get to know someone after so long. You can tell which twin is broadcasting based on which direction. Yeah, usually I'm looking kind of this way. Cameron's looking this way. His camera's on the other side, typically. So, going back to the face here, let's actually see if we can find a good... Okay, let's go with this one. It's not an extreme facial pose, so we'll start with this first. And, well, actually, let's see if I can find an extreme one. Okay, this one's a little bit more extreme. So, when we're looking at the face and trying to figure out how do we pose it, we're really looking for the exact same thing that we're looking for in the body, which is line of action, contrapposto, and then we're looking for the kind of visual elements of the face that we can add to the rig, but we're not looking for the... How to say this? We have to keep in mind that everyone's face is different. Everyone has different facial features. Their eyes are different, their mouths are different, their noses are different. And because of this, we cannot just 100% take the exact elements. We have to figure out what is causing the shapes we see. So let's kind of break this down. So first of all, I like to start with contrapposto because usually that informs the line of action on the face. I think it's more important to understand the moved than the references, and this one can cost you one complete life and only a basic and poor element. Now with computer help child. Interesting. I'm not sure if I understood that. But let's start with the contrapposto. So for the contrapposto, the easiest thing to do is look at the brows, and you'll notice that one side is higher than the other. Well, that gives us a start. And then if we look at the mouth, you can usually look at the mouth corners, and this will give you the contrapposto. Now, the reason you want to look at the mouth corners and not kind of the general shape of the mouth for the contrapposto is that the mouth is curved. It is a curved surface. So if you're thinking of the mouth here, whether the face is kind of tilted up or down, even if a character's smiling, like we think of a smile as kind of this shape. So let me draw that a little better. Whoop. So a little smile like that. Well, if a character has just their mouth kind of neutral, like that, but you tilt their face down, that's going to create that curve. Because the mouth is not on a flat surface. It's not just this. The mouth is on a curved surface. So let me draw a better curved surface than that. So this is where I need Cameron to jump in because his drawings are way better than mine. Especially mouth drawing. I'm not good at drawing mouths. That's going to be the next thing I'm going to try to practice. So the mouth is on a curved surface, which means that if you have a straight line here, it's actually going to look curved right there. It's tilted to the camera. That's going to give you what looks like a smile from a tilted vantage point, which we're seeing here a little bit. He's got his head slightly tilted forward. I'll mention how you can kind of notice that, especially for subtle shots in a little bit. But this is giving him that kind of smile effect. He's not actually smiling. So, for the contrapposto, look for the corners of the mouth and then draw a line. Eyebrows, just kind of the general shape of the brows usually. Brows are so varied in their shape that if you kind of look for like, oh, the high point here and the high point there, or like the actual shape of them, everyone's going to be different. There's going to be no like consistency here. There's some general shapes that happen between people. So like this point here tends to happen on a lot of faces, but like for example, if you look at my brows, let's go full screen here. Like we get that little point there, but this side here is a lot shorter on my brows, and it's a lot longer right here. It's also kind of like kind of flat on the bottom right there. Now if we look at him, his is a little shorter there and longer here. And that's like two brows that are somewhat similar. Other brows are totally different. You can have brows that are just curves like that. You can have brows with a short peak and then a long trailing edge. Brows are very interesting to analyze, honestly, on their own. Just the different variations you can have. But we look at this, and this will often throw students off right away is, well, they look parallel. Well, yeah, in real life, our faces are not as exaggerated as we push in animation. But oftentimes, they're not actually parallel. So I wish I had a straight line tool on this. But if you could imagine that the line were to continue, this line would ever so slightly continue downwards this way. And this one would continue this way. Like that. Very slightly. I'm exaggerating it, but you can see that eventually they do have a contrast. They are not parallel. That means that they have some form of contrapposto, just slight, but we can exaggerate that. Okay, so that line there also informs typically the line of action of the face. The line of action usually curves with the face and the contrapposto, so something like this. Typically, not all the time, but typically. So we've got that. We've even got a little contrapposto in the eyes, so you can see how one eye is slightly more open than the other. It is actually much easier to see in terms of the lines there. Yeah, asymmetry, I can say that, add so much to a character. It is amazing. So anywhere we can find that and kind of add that into our pose is going to be very important. Okay, so we've kind of seen the line of action. It's kind of a little bit of a curve this way. And to exaggerate the contrapposto, it's kind of doing this. Okay, so we've got that. Now, what else can we look for? Well, like I was saying before, we need to figure out where the head is tilted, because that tilt in the head is going to change a lot on our character. So for example, if we have this shot here and our camera is straight on the character like this, the mouth is flat. If we tilt the camera up, we get a curve in the mouth. If we turn it down, we get a different curve. That's going to be very important in recreating that feeling of the pose without just kind of adding a smile when it shouldn't happen or adding a frown when it shouldn't happen. Now, the way you can kind of tell where the head is tilted is by looking at the ears. Normally, when a character or a human, not everyone, but most people, when you're looking straight ahead, absolutely straight, the line of your eyes, so let's say the top of your eyes right there, just give them mean brows, yeah, like that, will line up with the top of your ears. So your brows and your ears line up. So if I actually take my headphones off here and do that and stare straight at the camera, you can see that the brows line up close to the ears. Well, it's actually the eyes, like right there, line up with the ears. What this means is if I do this and you see that the ears are higher than the eyes right there. So let's floofy hair today getting in the way. So if I do this, you can see how those the ears are higher. That means I'm tilted down. If I tilt up, ears are lower than the brows right there. That means my head is tilted up. It gives you that fine detail. Great Doctor Strange look. Interesting. I never thought of myself as looking like Doctor Strange. A little line. Get that mane poofed up there. It's terrible, actually. It's very warm. It's very fluffy and just like traps all the heat. It's not good for the summer. But I do want to grow it out again. That is one of my goals. I don't know why, but gonna do it. So by looking at that angle, we can very quickly tell where our reference is looking. Now, in terms of left to right, again, you can look at the ears. Normally, I like to look at ears because there's this kind of visual distancing that makes it easy to tell or to see the small changes. So what I mean by visual distancing is if two things are very close together and then they move, it can be very hard to see any little change. The further you move them away, you'll see a lot of change. Like if I do this and then I rotate my body, let's go full screen again. If I do this and rotate my body, like the change between the two hands is very small. But if I do this and I rotate my body the same amount, you can see there's a big visual change between just that. So because the eyes and then the ears are kind of further away, it gives you an easier time to see those visual changes. Oh, take care, Skolas. Have a great day. Social distancing is so this year the new thing is visual distancing. We can't even look at each other anymore. Just little dots in the horizon. And Vito, hello. So by looking at the ears, we can see the tilt of the head and also the rotation of the head. You can see that one ear is definitely a lot more visible than the other. So this gives us the direction, which is going to be very important in getting the overall pose to feel correct. Okay, what else can we look for? Well, the main thing I tend to see is issues with the eyes. And I've talked about this a lot in the past. But eyes are very important to really deconstruct in order to understand the shape of them. So a lot of people, when they're drawing eyes or posing eyes for the first time, will draw or pose out the eye. So there's the orb of the eye right there. And then they will add the eyelid on top. So the eyelid kind of wraps around the eye. And let's say they're making an angry expression. They will pose out the eye to kind of give it this angry expression. So you get something like this, and then the angry brow over top. Something like that. So you get this expression here. Now this is okay for cartoony shots, really exaggerated cartoony shots. But even then, I'm personally not too much of a fan of this style of eye, because this line right here is totally unrealistic. Unless your eye already has that slant by default, your eye isn't going to suddenly, your eyelid specifically, is not going to slant inwards like that. It just won't. The thing that makes the eye slant this way is not the lid, but the brow. So, for example, here, you can see on the screen left eye, there's a little bit of that kind of frowning expression, but it's not the eyelid that's doing it. This is the brow. right there. So when you're drawing or posing out the eye, we really need to keep those two shapes separate. So for example, if you were to imagine the eye here, and then you've got the eyelid there, or sorry, the pupil and iris there, the eyelid, even on his face right here, would have the same general shape that it would normally have. This kind of arc right there, and then like that. So this kind of typical human eyelid shape. Now, not everyone has the exact same. You can push this a lot, but as he frowns, this shape does not change. The only thing that changes is the brow coming over top of it. And if you kind of remove this here, suddenly the character looks angry. But the eyelid did not change. That is very, very important. So the brow plays a huge part of it. Another thing to keep in mind, and I always forget the name of this part of the eye. I should just make an effort to remember it one day. Is that there's extra skin at the corner of the eye here. Right there. You can see this on this character right here. It comes through here, and it's kind of this section right there. His actual eyelid is down here. And then there's this other piece of skin that goes down. It's not really your brow, but it's just kind of some extra skin. Some people don't have it. Other people have a lot of it. Depending on your race, it also changes kind of how much of the actual eyelid you can see. So, for example, for me, go back to full screen, especially on my right eye here, I have a lot of that, where if I'm open my eyes, you can see my eyelids like that. But if I relax, you can see on my left eye, you can still see a little bit of the eyelid underneath. But with this one, very quickly, exaggerated there, I get this, which means that when I get old and my skin starts to sag, I'm going to get this look to myself, which is going to be interesting. Can't see through my own skin. Is going to be terrible. Supercilio? That could be it. I always forget it. Supercilio sounds like it could be correct. But that is, again, not the brow. That is skin. So, for example, this is a neutral state for me, but it gives this eye a little bit of a slant to it. So if I'm kind of looking in this direction, you can see that my eye is not just that round eyelid shape. Now, depending on the rig might not have that. The rig, let's go here and look at the rig we're using. He doesn't have that. His brows are so like bony thin that it's just kind of the eye socket all around. So if I'm not careful and I start posing out the eye by looking at this form right there, sure, I'm matching my pose, but I'm applying a what would be the right word? An anatomical feature that this character, my rig, doesn't have. I do, but my rig doesn't. That's like my rig has a chin that's like this long. I don't. Doesn't mean that I'm going to just move the mouth in whatever way. I have to keep in mind those anatomical features. Same thing if you have a character with 3 fingers. If you pose out the hand by looking at reference of your own hand or at reference online, you're going to have to remove a finger and you're going to have to make do. You can't just add a 4th finger because, well, the reference had it. It's the same thing here. You can't add it in just because the reference had it. We have to think of, is it important, or is it actually is it part of the expression, or is it just an anatomical feature? It would be like having an earring, for example. It adds to the character, but is that actually part of the expression, or is it just another feature? Or long hair, short hair, any of that. Or a mustache. So we have to be very careful of those and have to think through them. Another area similar to that I often see students kind of struggling with is the lips. And Nerazilla, thank you so much for the follow. Aw, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So the lips are hugely varied. Lips on characters are so different. Some people have kind of this this shape here for the top lip, and you can see the bottom lip kind of lines up to the corners there. Other people will have a similar design where it's kind of like that, but then the bottom lip actually only comes in very small, so you get this kind of slight pucker to the bottom lip. The top lips go way out in comparison. Some people's lips are paper thin, you just almost no lips at all, where others are very wide. The section up here, usually we will have that, and I forget, it starts with an F, I believe. The little indent under your nose right there, between your lip and your nose. Some people, that is very wide, others are narrow, which means that this section here is going to be sometimes very narrow. So you might have someone with very high lips like that, and then maybe a little bit more squared off on the bottom. Lips are super varied. Oh, take care, Greg. Hope the presentation goes well. Philtrum, that's it. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. It's not an F, it's a PH. I got the sound right. I'll give myself credit for that. I could at least remember that. So we've got the philtrum right there. So lips are super varied. Now, when many students are kind of analyzing the face, when they look at the mouth, they look at the lip shape and use that as kind of a guide for what the mouth is doing. Don't. The lip shape really doesn't mean anything in terms of applying a pose from your reference onto your actual character, onto your rig. Instead, just look at the line of the mouth. That's it. That's the important thing. The shape that that line creates. The rest of it is just kind of there. So it's not important to really look at. Now, if we were doing a character study and trying to analyze the facial features of what makes this character look like this character, that would include the shape of the shape of the lips, the shape of the eyes, and what creates that. We're not looking for that. What we're looking for is the essence of the pose. It's like looking at the gesture drawing. We're not trying to look at the anatomical details and like how big the muscles are, how big his hand, like proportionally how big his hand is, or the shape of his face, any of that. We just want the basic form that we can then apply to another character. We're looking for the basic elements of the face to apply. If we look too deep, what we end up doing is trying to copy the face. And in order to do that, we have to distort the rig and make something that is unappealing. So be very careful of that. Now, there's a few other things to look for in the face, like noses and things like that. So for example, a lot of people, if you look at their nose, and we'll see if we can find a good pose here. I want something that's straight on, but I don't think I'll find it. Well, let's see, just go through a little quickly here, see if we can find. Okay, so there you go. So most people, if you actually look at their nose, and MJ Animate, hello, welcome to the streams. I'm glad you like that you're finding them informative. So if you look at the nose is almost never symmetrical, just like the rest of the face. Eyes are not symmetrical. The nose is not symmetrical. So if you look at his nose, for example, look at the shape of the nostrils and kind of break them down into simple triangles. So let's do it again. So the small line there, and then longer line there. is very slight. When you draw it out, it's like not that much at all. But basically what we're getting is one is shaped a little like this. The other, to exaggerate it, is shaped a little like this. But he's looking pretty much straight on. Not exactly, but very close. Well, nostrils are not the same. So if you're looking at the shape of the nostril to kind of get the angle of the nose, it's not going to really help you. Instead, you want to look at how the nose relates to other things, like the mouth. How does the line of the nostrils, like there, the overall kind of angle of the nose match? The other thing to keep in mind is, like, depending on the nose, sometimes you won't see the nostrils at this angle. If your character has a nose that is kind of this hooked design here, something like that, that's going to be very different than if your character or your reference has a little button nose like that. Well, you can't copy it exactly at all in many cases. So what we need is to just look at the general lines. Again, studying the face for posing, and this goes for gestures as well, it is not a matter of copying. That is not the point. As we can look at it, we can study it. It's always useful. But when we're translating it from one to the other, we are not copying, and we are trying to break it down to the core elements we need. So, kind of looking at the mouth here. So we look at the shape of it. Again, not the lips, because you can see this guy has very kind of flat lips. The other one had kind of this shape to them, where it's got this little bend here. He actually has it round the other way. So that's a totally different lip shape. That would cause a lot of problems if we tried to copy that. But if we look at the inside of the mouth, we can see this. And usually when I'm looking at the lips, I'm trying to think of it in a design sense. So what I mean by this is it can be very easy to get caught up in all the tiny details. So we've got, if I was to really go through, a little line right here, and then it curves up and then down and then like that. Down here we got all of this. You can overcomplicate that mouth shape. Again, a lot of the finer details come from the anatomy of this specific person's mouth. Not everyone's mouth is going to be the same. So instead, we want to try and find the little general design elements. Now, in terms of mouth design, usually it's going to be one simple curve and one more complex curve. So for example, if you have a smile, let's say you have something like that, simple line, and then you would have a slightly more complex line. Now this is where I can't draw mouths at a 3/4. Why did I choose a 3/4 to draw this with? So you'd have simple line and then a little bit more complex. Now let's do one straight on. So you've got a simple line, and in this case, his mouth is a little bit like this. You've got these kind of flat lines right here, and then like that. But the top is a little bit simpler. So you could actually do something probably like this, looking at his mouth shape here. Something like that. So you can see the top is very simple. The bottom is a little bit more complex. If both are complex, then what you're going to end up with is something that is not visually appealing. So we have to really choose where we want to simplify the shapes. Again, we're not trying to copy these exactly. We're just trying to get the core element of what this character is feeling. And then we have to apply that to our character. For example, if your character has really loose lips, maybe he's like a droopy dog and he's got these sad jowls all the time. Well, when he opens his mouth and does this, that bottom lip is going to hang. That's part of his design. He's not going to have that kind of upper curve that this guy might have. Or maybe your character has these really tight lips where it's just like pulled tight on the face, like a villain or something with just this kind of almost constant snarl to him. Well, when he opens his mouth, it's not going to be relaxed in any way. It's going to still be tight. So we have to keep in mind who this character is. Do you ever imagine when you were starting AM that one day you'd be one of the most mentors and you'd be drawing mouse shapes to teach us cool stuff? I definitely didn't ever think I would be doing something like this. Now, in terms of most well known, I don't know. Personally, I don't think I'm that well known, but I guess looking at it objectively, I guess it is kind of true. But it's definitely not something I had envisioned. Like when Cameron and I started Animation Mentor so many years ago, it's just weird to think where we were and where we are now, and how like the weird path that it came, or that we took to get to where we are now. It's definitely been a journey. And one day I hope that journey will lead me to a place where I can draw mouth shapes super appealingly and easily, and I'm not struggling with trying to get basic forms in. One day, that's a goal. Like I do plan on doing that one day. Blaze, it's out of topic, but I wanted to ask, should I put overlaps and follow through in blocking, or can I move the whole arm using dope sheet to delay the key? This is all based on your workflow, so there is no right answer to this. If you are animating, for example, in a layered fashion, where you are just animating one body part and then another, then you're going to be offsetting things like crazy. So, for example, in the horse riding animation that I did during the last stream, I was offsetting curves at every single point, and I was just in basic blocking. So yeah, you can definitely exaggerate or like offset that. If you're using pose to pose method of animating, I typically try to build the pose or the overlap all within the poses themselves. So I do not offset curves until the very end, the polish phase. I'll try to offset curves then, or maybe like refining. But my blocking, I build the overlaps into the pose themselves. But overlaps follow through all of it. So basically, what that means is, imagine, let's see here. Let's bring my timeline in here. Oops, want that. Okay. So let's say we have a pose here, and we have an arm that's about to hit the table. So it's there. And then we need it to hit the table here. Something like that. So it's coming down and then hits the table. Well, I could offset curves in order to get this, but this would mean that my core animation, I would have to put the arm here. The arm would be kind of just straight, and then I'd offset it to get it to bend. And to me, it's like there's a lot of thinking in there that you don't need to do. If you're working pose to pose, just put the pose where you want it. So for example, I know that the elbow needs to ease out right there, so I'll put the elbow there. Now I know that I want that arm to maybe anticipate back. So for example, if I'm hitting, I'm not just going I just down like that. I might bring my elbow down, but my hand might come back. So I might do this and then hit. So we get this little arcing motion. So it's elbow down, hand back. and then down. So let's just do that. Put the pose where I want it to be. Like that. Now let's actually add another key in here. So now it's coming down. Again, I want that spacing to be very hard. So let's actually get the elbow to hit here. And then think of the arc. So it's coming through here and then arcs through. Now this is where 2D is very nice because you can just kind of draw out the arcs where you want. So let's say I want the spacing to start to go a little faster, but I still want the big spacing to be right there. So now I just put the hand where I want it to be. Like that. And then we get that. So I'm just thinking through where I need the poses. Now this is a very simple example, but honestly, that's the way I animate pose to pose. It's you put the pose where you need it to be. If you need overlap, build in the overlap. If you need some offset, build in the offset. If you need some overshoot, put in the overshoot. It's it is tricky, like Sin said. It's one of the hardest concepts to understand. It was the same thing for me because it's like, but how? Like what? Where do you put the overlap? Because it's supposed to overlap, but when you're just posing it, it's just a pose. And it can be very tricky, but once you get it, it makes your animation so much stronger because you can just build all of those out and you feel it right in your first blocking pass. And in many ways, I prefer it over offsetting. Now, again, this is so dependent on everyone's workflow. Some people prefer offsetting, and that's not bad. As long as you get the result in the end, that's the important thing. And this is kind of the important thing with anything that I talk about here on stream. For anyone here, keep in mind that a lot of this is kind of my workflow and my approach. If it doesn't work for you, that doesn't mean that you're a bad animator and, oh, I didn't understand. It just might mean that you have a different workflow. And that's it. I had many teachers where they would teach me their workflow and it's like, they are really good animators. They are masters. And I tried to do what they were doing and it's like, this is horrible. I don't get it at all. It just didn't click. And it's just because for me, my brain doesn't work the way that theirs does. And trying to pose things out and do it the way that they wanted, it just didn't work. Now, I'm glad I did it. This is the important thing. As animators, we have to try different workflows, even if it is uncomfortable for us. Because you never know when that workflow might actually be really good for another situation. So for example, when people ask me what my workflow is, I don't really have an answer because I don't really have one workflow. Sometimes I'll work pose to pose. Other times I'll work in a layered method. Other times I work straight ahead. Other times I do a mixture of all three. There is no specific time or like there is no specific workflow. Really, it's just whatever workflow works best for what you're currently doing. That's pretty much it. So hopefully that helps. I know it's kind of a non-answer, but it is an important concept to keep in mind, that kind of difference. And workflows come as you animate. Exactly. As you gain more experience, you're going to just get used to doing different workflows, and you will start to find what works best for you. So let's see here. I'm just going to see if there's any other... That's an awesome face here. Okay, so actually this face brings up another really important thing that I did want to talk about in the face. And that is, once again, thinking of the roundness of the mouth. The mouth is actually much bigger than the teeth. So So what I mean by this is if ever you look at someone's mouth and they open up their mouth, the teeth don't go all the way to the end of the jaw here, for example. It's not like your teeth just stretch out here, so when you smile, it just goes way out. Our teeth, if you were to look at the front view, kind of stop right there. After that, this is all muscle and jaw. That's it. Our teeth are much smaller than the width of our face and the width of our mouth. That's a very important thing to keep in mind, because as we open our mouth and really go into this big mouth shape here, the teeth stick out a lot further than the mouth, because the mouth wraps around the teeth and then keeps stretching back, so we get this offset and this stair step effect. So you get something like that. So when you're opening the mouth, a lot of people, when they first start posing out a rig, what they'll do is they'll pose out the mouth where the mouth kind of wraps around this way, because they try to keep that round shape in there. That's not going to happen. It has to wrap around the teeth, go back around there. Same thing when you smile like this. The smile doesn't just stretch sideways, it pulls back. Last time I tried was 3.5 months ago. It was painful, and I was like, nope, and went back to my good old workflow. I should try to do it. I don't know if I've ever done a fully layered shot that wasn't a cycle. I know I've done a layered workflow, like partially for a shot, for quadruped shots mostly. But to do a fully layered method, I don't know if I would want to, honestly. It just seems like more headache than anything. So, it's the same one. There you go. He's just excited to see the other guy. Okay, so we've kind of covered a lot of different elements here on the face to look for. So let's actually start posing some things out. Now, I'm going to be just taking one of these here. Let's see. Let's start with this one. This was the first one we looked at. And let's try to apply the things we saw in this onto the rig. So let's kind of recap. Line of action. Slight line of action this way. I'm exaggerating right there. Contrapposto in the face right here. The frown is not being caused by the eyelids, but by the brows overlapping the eyes. There's a tilt to his head. He's tilted his head down and over to the side. We can see more of this side here. The mouth shape is curved, but he's tilting his head down, which will automatically give it a curve. He's not smiling. The brows, we can see just by the kind of lines here that they're coming in. So he's frowning. It's not just down, it's in. It's a frown. What else can we look at here? We're seeing a little bit of the nasofold right there. Now, the nasofold is one of those things that I'll look for, like how intense it is. But honestly, everyone's a little different. So, for example, my nasofold is quite distinct, especially down here. Not everyone has that. Like, some people it's only up here. Other people it's like further out. Everyone's nasofold is a little different. It just depends on how the muscles work. And other people get dimples right there. Again, it's just the musculature of the face. So those are details that, okay, it's important to know that it gets deeper as you smile or as you kind of pull on this side, but it's not a, oh, well, they've got a nasofold, let's put that in. It depends on the character more than anything. Okay, so what else? We can see that the bottom lids are kind of touching the bottom of the eye right here. That's pretty normal. The bottom lids actually don't move that often. or sorry, don't move that much unless we really squint. Our bottom lids don't really have musculature of their own. This is actually a very important thing to keep in mind. So there's all of this is just skin. Our eyelids, there's no muscles in our eyelids. It's not like we can just kind of flex them and twist them around. That would be kind of horrible. Uh, it's just skin. What moves the eyelid is the muscles around it. So for example, you've got the oculus something. I always forget the name of it. Cameron would know. The oculus muscles all around the jacked eyelids. Oh, that would be horrible. Just squeeze. You don't want things with muscles squeezing around your eyes. That would be terrible. So the lids are just skin, which means that they are controlled by other elements. Our brows, our cheeks, all of this. So when you're looking at a character, and let's go full screen here. So for example, this is always hard because my camera's at the wrong angle here. So if I try to open my eyes really big or really squint, you'll notice that the bottom lids do move. But more than anything, it's not the lid that's actually moving up and down. Yes, it does a little bit. It's the skin right here. Like if I push my face up here, like getting that ridge versus stretching out. The lid itself, the actual line, if you look at the pupils and the iris, if I do this, they don't move that much in comparison to the actual eye. A little bit, but not a huge amount. Now, in animation we can exaggerate. That's always a good thing. But the bottom lid is not hugely mobile. So, we can kind of take a look at that, see where that is. What other elements can we look at here? I guess the other thing, and this is very important even for facial posing, is look at the angle of the body. The body has a lot of elements to it that are going to influence the face. So for example, we can see that the neck here, he's kind of angled downward. So he's kind of angled slightly forward. We can see that by the lines of the neck. His shoulders are slouched. That's going to be good elements to put into this pose to really get it to read. So for example, if I did this, but I changed my pose to this gives a totally different expression or feeling to the pose than this. So yeah, if the body won't work, the face won't matter. And even if we're doing just kind of a portrait, like just shoulders up like this, you want to pose out those arms. If the arms are still in the T pose and the body is all straight, but then you just tilt the head, that's not going to work. The whole body needs to go into this, even just a little bit. So we've got all of this. Let's try creating this. Now we'll see what happens. I'm just going to put this on my other monitor and let's take a look at him. So vastly different body proportion. And Happy Alan, thank you so much for the follow. I really appreciate that. So let's pose this out. Now in this case, I'm going to try and match the angle pretty closely. Normally, I don't really care about matching the angle because honestly, it's whatever needs to be best for the shot. For this exercise though, let's kind of match it close enough. So before I do anything, I'm going to pose out the body. So the character was kind of leaning forward slightly, neck a little bit forward. I'm actually going to take the head here and let's turn on the follow line. So get that to lean forward ever so slightly. Let's take the shoulders, relax them just a little bit here, and even let's add some twist to the body, because I'm noticing that there's a kind of a twist to this guy's body where his head and his body are not exactly lined up. Now, does this have to be in here? Honestly not. It's really just trying to make it so it's not perfectly symmetrical. So I'm going to close our eyes Lower lids go up a tiny bit, but not much. Our upper lids do most of the work. So let's take that. Okay, and this is a personal preference. We don't see the arms here, but I don't like keeping arms in the kind of T-pose, so I'm just going to move those down. Okay, so let's start posing out the head. The first thing to do is pose out the actual direction of the head. Right now, if we look at the ears, they are both even on both sides. That's not what we saw in our reference. His ears, we can see one more than the other. Now keep in mind, ears are different. Some people have ears that stick way out, others, their ears are flat to their face. So I can't just go, well, in my reference, this ear was almost completely gone, so I'll turn it all the way this way. No, because this rig has kind of wider ears than the reference. So we're going to see more of it. Instead, I just want the general kind of feel of that motion. Let's see, do you prefer to use IK spine than FK? No, I almost always use FK, unless I'm doing like layered animation. I just used IK here because this way it makes it easier to pose and faster. Since I'm only focusing up here and we're not doing actual animation, I don't mind just using that. If this was an actual scene that I was animating, I would definitely be using the whole FK spine to make sure that I got the full effect right from the hips all the way up the spine. Even if we don't see them, I should still be animating them. Let's see, our ears are so complicated to draw. Oh yeah, ears are so unique. I think they're almost more unique than fingerprints in a way. And what is layered animation? Layered animation is when you take one part of the body, you animate that first, and then you take that animation and, oops, almost dropped my pen there, and then copy it onto other parts, or just animate other parts after. So for example, you might animate just the hips moving through the scene, doing all its hippie things. Then you'll add just the legs, then animate those throughout the scene. Then you add the body, then you add the arms, then you add the head. So you're doing it in layers, which is the opposite of pose to pose, which is you are doing the full pose, putting a key, creating the full pose, and then you go to the next pose and you do the full pose. So you're working kind of globally. Layered is animating kind of, you can kind of mix them together, so you can do a little post pose and a little layered, but normally when you're talking about layered, it means that we're focusing on animating one thing, and then once that's kind of in place, not completely done, but in place, then we can move on to something else and kind of build up our animation that way. It's a very good workflow if you're doing kind of complex interactions with things. Okay, so now let's tilt his head down. So once again, we can look at the angle of the ears to the eyes for this. Now, once again, also watch out that the rig's proportions are different. So in my reference, his ears are quite a bit higher than his eyes, which would mean I would have to tilt his head like all of this way in order to get that same thing. I probably don't want that, but I could still exaggerate. So let's actually tilt the head just a little bit more this way. And now another thing is the tilt of the head this way. Let's put that in here as well. So maybe something like that. Tilt is always nice because it adds a little level of exaggeration. Okay, so we've got that. We've got the basic angle of the head. Okay. Now, once I have that, let's actually change the eye direction and get that close to where we want it. So I want it to look kind of towards the camera, so we have this nice offset between the eyes and the head direction. If they're just straight, it'll look boring. But if we get this kind of contrast, I think it'll make it a lot more visually interesting. And this will also kind of lead into another thing about eyes, which is very tricky. Eye direction. While animating, you think about physics laws or just what looks good? Both. So you want to think about physics in the sense of motion should feel believable. And then you want to think of what looks good because, well, you want it appealing. The appeal is kind of foremost. Now, the thing that is different is that the physics we follow don't have to be real world physics. It could be the physics of the cartoon world. So for example, Hotel Transylvania. The physics in that don't work the same way as the real world. So if anyone's seen that, one of my favorite scenes is when Frankenstein jumps off the diving board and he just plummets down, and then it cuts to a wide shot, like a really wide shot, and you just see him falling, and it's just like this linear, slow motion. It's like he's falling so much slower than he should be falling, and it's hilarious just to watch him fall. That is not real world physics, but it's the physics of that world. Now, does that mean that, well, now we can do it whatever we want because we're not following real world physics? No, he's still falling down. He's not falling in a zigzag pattern. He's falling in a straight line. When you see all the characters, for example, jumping and doing all of these big actions, they're super exaggerated, but they are following some constants. They are not jumping forward and then just kind of zigzagging through the air unless there's a specific reason, unless they stop themselves in some way. I love Hotel Transylvania. It is a masterclass in cartoony animation. The same thing applies to or to any Warner Brothers cartoons like The Roadrunner and all of those. There are specific rules that need to be followed for the cartoon world. It doesn't have to always be physical laws like we have in the real world, but some sort of consistency, or else there's going to just be no rhyme or reason for the animation. It'll just be chaotic and it won't be fun to look at, because as an audience, we're not going to understand what's happening from one scene to the next. Yeah, Tom and Jerry, like that one has amazing cartoon physics. Like, it's just so over the top. So I'm trying to think. Yeah, it's really just be consistent with the world you create. Now, it could be any kind of world. It could be a world where physics don't work whatsoever, but then you can't have them suddenly start working for no reason, or else then things feel off again. Your face tells me you're a bit tired. See, Nicholas is an AM student. He's in class 5 right now. He has mastered the ability to read faces and understand what they mean. I am actually tired. I didn't get to sleep very much last night, which it was a choice because I'm trying to reset my sleep schedule. I'm trying to get back into a proper sleep schedule because I got way off. So I made sure I slept a little or very little last night so that I can get to sleep early tonight and get back. Yeah, that's my secret. I'm always tired. Always on the brink of just kind of nodding off. Plus, I woke up like at 3 a.m. this morning, and I just had so much, like, I woke up and I wasn't tired. It's like, 3 a.m. Great! I thought this was going to be way harder than it was going to be. And then when it got to noon, that's when it hit me. But at 3 a.m., man, I was doing so much work. It's awesome. Some of you probably got my messages at 3 a.m. What sleep schedule do you want to get to now? One that fits with the Q&As. My sleep schedule started falling off of the Q&A schedule, which meant that I was sleeping much less than I should have. So I want to kind of get into a sleep schedule that fits with those so I can sleep between Q&As, basically. What's my time zone? I'm in Central Time. So I'm in Manitoba, Canada. I thought not sleeping gives superpowers. Yes, not sleeping is the anti-superpower. You think you're doing amazing, and then you actually go to sleep and wake up and it's like, what was I doing? Oh my god. How did I not realize I was just doing all of this horrible stuff? Let's see. I had one of the longest days at work in my life. I just came to say hello. Oh yeah, go to bed. Sleep, rest, relax. You deserve it. Okay. So let's jump back in the face here. So we've got the angle and we got the eye direction. Now, just a quick note on eye direction is tricky. It doesn't take much before eye direction goes from looking natural to looking totally odd. So when you're posing eyes, there's no solid rule to where eyes will kind of point. So for example, a lot of people actually I have a quick Twitch related question. Is it possible to show two programs as separate windows on a Twitch stream? Yes. So right now I'm sharing my whole desktop, so that way I can just go boop and you guys can see all that. But if I wanted to, I could share just one program or one window, and I could do many of them. You could show 5 or 10 different separate windows as different elements, and that way you're not showing your whole desktop. For example, if I'm playing video games, that's what I'm doing. I'm sharing just the one window versus the entire desktop, the game window. And you can have as many of those as you want, or as I should say, as many as your computer will allow without breaking. So in terms of eye direction, the big thing I would watch out for is how crossed the eyes are. Usually we want to go from somewhat parallel. I don't like going full parallel where the eyes are kind of like evenly looking straight, because I find that kind of makes a character look like they're like slightly dazed and like they got hit in the head. I like to have them slightly crossed, but the amount of crossing in the eyes is really dependent on what I want the character to feel. If I want them to feel like they are looking at something, the eyes will be more parallel. So a little bit kind of more out. If I want them to feel like they are having an internal thought, where they're thinking like, oh man, did I get to leave the stove on? Or just kind of this internal monologue, bring the eyes closer together. So for example, if I wanted him to be thinking to himself, I would bring these in ever so slightly. Just a little. Like, again, you go too far and it doesn't take long before it's like he's trying to look at something on his nose. But just a little bit. And it's amazing how little you actually need. The other thing is try to keep the eyes from being offset from the face. So for example, if I do this, my eyes are at an angle. They don't straighten out. So for example, this is where you start getting eyes that are very tricky. So you'll notice that if we look at the view here and line up the eyes with the top of the screen, they're almost parallel, which you would think, that's perfect, they're lining up, yay. Except what it does is it creates this like tilted look to the eyes, which I'm not a fan of. Eyes move with our head. They are basically locked into our skull. So try to keep it in line like that. It's not always going to be the case, but it will be there. Now, usually where students have this issue is with the follow align attribute. This determines whether the control of the eyes follow the head, like this, or stay behind. So if you turn this on here, this is great because now I can move the head and the eyes kind of lock, which is really nice. But, oh, take care, Sarah. Have a great night. But the problem with this is that the eyes are now not going to rotate with the head. So if I was to pose out the head at a really severe angle here, suddenly there's going to be this slight, like, weird offset to the eyes, which can be very tricky to fix. If you rotate that, that solves it. Not fully, but most of it. And you can actually see it, like, let's undo and redo here. It's that versus that. Like, this eye almost looks like it's looking up here, while this one's looking right at us. And then if you line that up, now they're looking in the same direction. It's not a huge difference, but it's enough to throw you off. So if you are using follow line to keep the eyes locked in place, make sure you're rotating it or offsetting that kind of motion to match the angle of the head. It's not just kind of putting it in place and it's done. Yay! Haha! No, we have to rotate and kind of keep in consideration what the head is doing. Always use follow line. I love follow line, like, personally. Although if I'm using follow line, this is another separate tip, but something that can be very useful. If you're using follow line off, that means the eyes are locked 100% to the head. Honestly, this almost never happens, because even if I'm not looking at anything and I'm turning my head, my eyes will kind of gravitate to things in front of me. So what ends up happening is this creates a doll-like effect, like a puppet, where the eyes are just kind of stuck in the head. Now, if we turn follow line on, this will give us a little bit more of a natural look, because it makes it look like the character is locked on to something. But often this can be too locked on, especially when things are really close, or if there's like subtle motions like this in the head. Not if it's a big turn like this, whoosh, whoosh, you're not going to notice anything. But if it's a little turn like this in the head, you can start to feel that the eyes are kind of too locked. It's almost like they're glued in place. So when I'm animating the eyes, often I don't set it to 0 or 1 for the follow line. I'll set it a little bit on one or a little bit on the other. So for example, if I want the eyes to lock in place, like what we had, I don't want them to lock 100%. So I might just put it to 0.9, not fully locked. What that means is if we watch that control, it still stays in relatively the same place, but you can see that it's actually moving ever so slightly. This gives me that slight offset with the eyes, where the eyes, they are stuck in our head. There's muscle holding them in place. So as you tilt your head around and do this, that muscle is going to still affect the eyes and adjust them. Now they're not just perfectly constrained and locked onto something. Same thing if I want the eyes to stay and just follow the head. Let's set this to maybe 0.2. Now as he turns his head, his eyes follow along, but they're not perfectly following along. It's harder to see here. But there's going to be this slight offset where they're not just locked in this, like, let's say there's 50%, or the pupil is directly in the middle of the eye, 50% on one side, 50% on the other. It's not going to stay like that as he's moving his head. It's going to slightly adjust, ever so slightly. And then from there, I can adjust it a little bit more if I want. So that is kind of some ways of getting the eyes to feel a little bit more natural, and to avoid that, I guess you could say, wall-eyed effect. Okay, so I'm actually going to bring his eyes up a little bit. I want him kind of looking not directly at the camera. If he was looking directly at the camera, it would be kind of like right here. It's like slightly past the camera. It's almost like, imagine my face is the camera. He's looking like right here somewhere, like right next to the camera lens. well, actually, here I can show you. It would be the difference between me looking here, where I'm looking directly into the camera lens, versus looking here, slightly next to the camera lens. Usually that feels a little bit better for filming versus looking directly in the camera lens, because that can look creepy. And you'll notice that when I'm looking at the screen here, I don't actually look into the camera lens, I look below it, which tends to give a little bit more of an appeal typically than if you have a character looking straight into the camera lens. So yeah, that kind of tends to look a little odd. Let's see, when you turn your head, do the eyes dart to the final point, or do they move smoothly following the head? Yeah, no, that feels so weird. I'll just do the rest of the stream staring straight into the lens. It's gonna be so horrible. So when you turn your head, it depends on what you're looking at. So actually, let's stick with full screen here. I'm getting a curl of hair. It's just starting to pop out. The hair is starting to grow really long. Oh well, it'll make me look pretty. There we go. So if you're moving your head, so I turn my head from there to there, the way it moves depends on what we're looking at and what we're thinking of at the time. Normally you would never see the eye move because it happens in a blink. So if I have my head here and I turn my head over there, you'll notice that I blink as I did that head turn. My eyes close as I turn, and then they're already in that position. The blink is very important because it helps us reorient ourselves and keeps us from getting very dizzy. And you can try this yourself. Just turn your head and don't blink. It's going to be very dizzying very quickly. Now, with that said, there are times when we will turn our head and we won't blink. Maybe you are scared, maybe you are really focused on something. In that case, eyes will either dart. So if I'm looking here, they'll dart over and then the head will turn. Or if my whole head is following, if I'm following something specifically, my eyes will move smoothly. If I'm doing this, my eyes will move very smoothly to follow that object. They track very nicely. If, though, I'm just kind of looking around, then my eyes will dart. Our eyes almost always dart unless they're focused on something very specific. Something that is moving. So this is where, like, if I'm focusing on my finger and moving that, my eyes will be smooth. If I'm reading a book, so I don't even know if I have anything. I want something long that I could read. So if I was to kind of read something here, if you watch the eyes, hopefully it's registering. I'm not tracking. You can barely see it. You can see it a little bit. I'm not tracking motion. I'm reading across the page and my eyes dart across. It's kind of like a stepped effect. It's not just smooth back and then smooth across. Because I'm not tracking what I'm looking at. The text isn't moving on the screen. My eyes are having to move across the screen to see the text. Really, the only time our eyes move smoothly is when we follow something. So hopefully that makes sense. Or when we're like lock our eyes in our head and then just turn the head. But even then we can have a little bit of like eye darts or eye shifts in there. Okay, so we've got that. So we've got the angle of the head, and then we've got the angle of the eyes pretty much set now. We'll kind of keep it for now. We might change it later, but let's start getting into the other elements. So personally, I like to start with the brows first. Brows and eyes. I just find it more interesting because, well, the brows especially are kind of the biggest element of the face other than the mouth, and they give a lot of the personality. I keep switching. We'll just pop back and forth. So for example, if I'm smiling and my brows are up, it's a happy smile. If I do this, that changes the smile completely. So usually, like, we think, oh, a smile means happy, a frown means sad. But the way you pose the brows changes the whole thing. The brows are usually one of the biggest things that can move on the face. Now, some people can't really move their brows that much. I used to not be able to, and I just practiced to really kind of move them up and down, which is great for animation shooting reference, but now I'm getting so many wrinkles up here. It's terrible. It's like, I'm not that old, and yet it's like, look at that. It's like a Klingon. It's terrible. The nerd in me. Which I do like Klingons, by the way. They were really, really cool. So, which rig am I using? I'm using the Overlord rig. This is an Animation Mentor rig. Which I really love. I love this rig a lot. I know a lot of people don't like him because his face is so absurdly long. But to me, that's what makes him so much fun, because you can, like, and I'll talk about this later, but you can push that mouth like way up here, way down, and you can just change the whole personality in him just like that. You can even like adjust the jaw as well. So like just by doing this, we get a totally different character. I'd have to tweak the lips a little bit, but like now he looks very different. And if I just took his head and kind of brought it down, now we've got kind of a normal human proportion. I really like this rig. It's just a lot of fun to try and push around and see what you can create with him. He does kind of look like the bad guy from How to Train Your Dragon 3. And also, hello Kevin Heron, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. So let's get those brows in here. I'm always with brows up, so my wrinkles are big now. I know, me too. I'm only 30, and it's like always so many wrinkles here. It's terrible. But maybe it's because I'm constantly looking surprised. Maybe. At least I'm not frowning, because when you frown, these kind of go away. You just get these ones in the middle here. So I guess I'm happy about that. So let's move his brows down. Now, as we were kind of looking in here, if we remember the reference, keep in mind that the brow is what's causing the eye to look angry. It's not the lid. So we need to lower the brow enough so we get that. We've also got the contrapposto in the brow. So let's kind of make sure I move this onto my other monitor. Let's push this basically to where we need it to be. And this is going to be one of the first things I always tell students. Push the brows. You've got a lot of room with brows. A lot of students, when they're posing brows, they might kind of go, okay, I'll make him angry. Oop. He's angry. Oh, he's surprised. And they just move it up and down a little bit. No. Push it. Like if he's surprised, those brows should be almost coming off his face. If he's angry, push them crazy amounts. It's amazing what you can get away with. So for example, if he's angry here, I'm just going to crank this as much as I can. And hey Lewis, thank you so much for the subscription. Oh man, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I gotta do the dance. Let's see, Sean Sexton's facial posing lecture is insanely good. Yes, his is amazing. And let's see, is that actually it right there? Oh, nice. Yeah, don't be afraid to push the brows. Brows are one of the few things, well, honestly, the face, one of the biggest things that you can do to make the face appealing is just exaggerate it. Don't be afraid of pushing the face and just going all out with it. The worst thing you can do is just kind of play that middle ground. So right now what I'm doing is I'm trying to create a line of action in the brow. Brows often have kind of a smooth line that flows between them. So what you can do for brows is imagine like a smooth line and then just erase the little bit in the middle. So create a unibrow, one smooth curve. And that'll tend to usually give you some appealing poses. So I'm just going to try and exaggerate this here. Now, I don't want to exaggerate too much, not for this expression, but I still do want to exaggerate. So something like that. I kind of feel like he needs a little bit more anger in this brow right there, so I'm going to bring it down. There we go. Also, don't be afraid of just rotating the brows globally if you need to. That can help a lot. Okay, so something... maybe something like that. We'll use that as a starting point. So... how to spell Klingon, and the Klingon emoji popped up. That's awesome. I didn't even realize there was a Klingon emoji. It's a good emoji. I like it. So we've got that. Now let's actually go to the lids here. So for the lids, the main thing that I like to do is first just figure out where the main lid is going to be. In this case, he's kind of angry, and one of the big things when you're really angry is your eyes actually open up. So if you look at someone who's kind of pissed off, they might have their eyes like this, like squinty. But if they're really angry, their eyes open up and the brows come down. So the eye is actually very open. It's the brow that makes it feel like it's closed. So if I want this character to kind of feel like he's like a little bit shocked and kind of angry, I'm actually going to make it so that his eyes don't close here, because even though we don't see it, we're going to feel it right in there and in there. So let's make sure we get that nice open lid here. So something like that. Bottom lid, let's see, maybe I can close a little bit to exaggerate that squint in the eye. And like we said before, there was a line of action, a contrapposto, even with the eyes, where the screen left eye was slightly more closed than the screen right. So let's open that here, and you can see how that changes the intensity of the look. Let's kind of just focus on the eyes here. Like this, he looks angry, but like kind of tired angry. You open up the eye just a little bit, and now he looks like he's really intensely angry. So something like that. And then let's shape the lid just a little bit. Now the shape of the lid, this is very subjective on who your character is. So there's no like set rule for this. But if you do want kind of a simple rule of thumb to follow in terms of posing out the shape of the lid follows the or tends to follow the shape of the lens of the eye. So let's go here. So imagine you have the eye. We're looking at it from a side view. The eye is not a sphere. It has a lens to it, like this. It's got a little bump to it on the front. This means that if you kind of pose out the eyelid, kind of imagine a stick going through like this. Basically, that's the pivot point of the eye. The eyelid wraps around the eye and wraps over that lens, which would be right over the pupil, right there. It wraps around and then over. So something like that. Oh, Twitch just went